Hi, friends. Welcome. Welcome to a little, sort of flashback for Hannah and me, but also for some of you who couldn't be at NACAC. This is like what happened, at least a little piece of it from our corner. We're glad you're here. Thanks for being with us at this festive time of year. And our check-in question is pretty light. What's your drink of choice these days? For me, it's a LaCroix, a guava LaCroix is what I'm drinking now. Hannah's working on some electrolytes I've learned recently. So let me share my screen and we'll get right into the thing itself. Um, this is our we love this slide AHA Slides situation. If you go to ahaslides.com/Q41QL, in fact, maybe our rad moderator Diana would share that link in the chat. It'll give you a chance to actually see the slides, and if you want, you can do little emojis and stuff. So feel free to do that while we're introducing ourselves. And this little slide here will stay put while we do this part. Hannah, do you want to say hi?
Hi everyone, my name is Hannah, like Ohana means family, and I'm the director of workshops here at College Essay Guy, and you can see some of the other work that I've done through College Essay Guy. My background is being an English teacher in I feel like a past life, but those are kind of like more the resume type stuff, but I identify as a she, her, a wife, a cat mom. Both of them are here out of screen and I'm in heaven. And so these are some of like my more specific things. I'm clearly a Broadway lover. I put the most recent playbills on my wall. And so, yeah, lots of different identities, and that's a little bit of me.
Lovely. You don't know it yet, but these identities things are going to come back in a few minutes. Some ways that I identify, things that you may or may not know about me. I'm a third culture kid. Yes, I wrote the third culture kid college essay, some version of it. Fun fact. I used to live in Harlem for a year. Some of you know that about me. Most of you probably don't. I am a hugger. That's if you've met me at a conference, you've learned that about me. And I love talk and snack. In fact, if I had another podcast, it would be probably Talk and Snack with the Snack King, is what my good friend Rizzo says. The other bullet points, you can read those here. If you don't, like, I don't know how familiar, probably a range of familiarity with College Essay Guy. We started this journey, I guess, officially in 2014. And, every year millions of folks come to the website. We're all about the free resources, as many of you know. We've got an awesome Matchlighter Scholars Program, which I'm going to share a little bit more about that in a little bit, where that's pairing free one-on-one college students who could use some application support with awesome, experienced, caring counselors like yourselves. And we also, partner in some situations with colleges, which has been fun lately. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We've got a little, what's called the College Counselor Snapshot. It's a little 5-minute self-assessment that we're going to offer y'all. And by filling out the thing, you're going to essentially get back, and you can either scan this if you want to do this on your phone, or you can type in this link, which you click this link, which again, Diana will share with you. I'm giving Diana a lot to do. And this sort of self-assessment is going to give you a series of questions about how you would rate your own abilities or skills in a particular set of areas in the college counseling sphere. And then we're going to basically share resources for every single one of the areas that we ask a question about. So do this now. Go to this link, tinyurl.com. You can open up a separate tab and type this in, /CEG NACAC 2023. And Diana very graciously has put that link in the chat. So we will encourage you to do this now. And I'm going to give you like maybe 3 or 4 minutes to do this. Diana, if we could just pause the recording, because then it'll be like a shorter recording, that would be lovely. All right. So some of you finished, some of you are still maybe working on it. If you're watching a recording, feel free to pause until you finish the assessment. Here are the different areas that we want to talk about a little today. And each of these feel like important parts of our job as counselors. And we gave ourselves the sort of like homework this year of like, can we offer something new, something that we haven't put out in the world for each of these categories? So the first one is what we'll call values-based goal setting. So one of the things that College Essay Guy is working on this year is access. That's one of our core values. And as we think about, okay, well, what's a goal that we'd like to set around this? This is how we sort of set our goals each year. We set the goal to create 10 resources specifically for traditionally underrepresented students and their counselors. And so this is kind of the first resource that we wanted to share out after the Supreme Court decision came out. We'd already created maybe 5 or 6 resources, and this let us know, hey, here are some other resources that we could create. And so we put together a set of resources about students who are thinking about, should I write about race in my application? If so, how do I do it? We've got some exercises that Hannah's going to walk you through in just a few minutes. We've got a guide to, for example, writing about the diversity prompt and other supplemental essays. And I'll put this in the chat. I share this as sort of an example of like, here's a concrete way that we were thinking about this particular goal of access. So a question that I have is, sorry, I'm going to skip forward past this because I kind of walked you through these. I guess I'll share the other example, is that we had this goal to work with 600 low-income students with 600 counselors via our Match Letters program. And we've matched so far, as of when we did this at NACAC, 508 counselors. We're still looking for 42 counselors. So quick side note, and we'll put the link in, if you are willing to work this year in the next few months with a low-income student, we would super love to have you. So we'll put that link in. It's just collegeessayguy.com/matchletters. That's just another example of like values-based goal setting. So here's a thought experiment. Let's take a minute or two to do this. What's a core value that you're working on? Let's say just to the end of 2023. Take a look at this list here. I know it's kind of small. I'll give you the larger version. There's the values exercise. Here, I'll give you a larger version if you want to open up a separate tab. I'll put this in the chat. I know we're sharing lots of links. Don't worry, we'll follow up with them all in the email follow-up. So pick a core value that you're wanting to, maybe it's something you're wanting to bring more of into your life. And then ask yourself, all right, what's one specific thing that I could do to bring more of that thing into my life? And if you feel like sharing in the chat, I'd be curious to hear. What's a specific way that you could bring that quality, whatever that quality is, into your life? So an example might be, I'm interested in more calm. And so a thing that I might do is maybe take a walk tomorrow. And it's like, you might be like, well, I don't need any more action items between now and November 1st. So it could be like, after November 1st, here is a thing that I will do. Is there a specific, so for each value that you're naming, is there a specific thing that you could, what is the specific way that you could potentially bring that into your life? And just so you know, you don't, again, have to commit to doing it. It's just sort of like a thought exercise, a brainstorm. Core value, concrete goal you could set. For example, I want to have more slowness in my life. Maybe I'll meditate for 5 minutes each morning. And then if you want, you can share in the chat. Thanks, some of you are sharing. Okay. Hannah, I'm going to kick it over to you.
All right, so this is another exercise that we've been using. And so when I was teaching juniors and seniors, and sometimes even freshmen, just English. And I would have them do like this poetry anthology where the students had to figure out, they were going to write a series of poems, but they had to match a certain theme. So it's essentially our montage essay, but in poetry form. And so oftentimes what I would have them do is to brainstorm. And so we even had like, it's similar to like I Love, I Know, we had like writing territories and different things. But in this case, I had them do this exercise called Things I Know to Be True. And this is from a exercise I adopted from a TED Talk that I saw by Sarah Kay. And it's a really great, powerful one, but it's called If I Should Have a Daughter. And what she does is she, to inspire students to get into spoken word and things, she has them write lists like, what are some things that I know to be true? Like, because they would often say, I have nothing to write about. And so when I would have my students do this, I was actually really, really surprised with a lot of the things that they would say, because I would tell them, even though you're not like a child and you're not like a full-blown adult paying your own rent and buying your own groceries, you're in this like middle area where you get to like have these insights that you have lived enough of life to say, I know this to be true. And so what I would have students, basically we would do a free write of me asking them, tell me 10 things you know to be true in life because of your life experiences. And if you go to the next slide, these are some of the things that my students would write. And so they would, and I was always incredibly blown away by some of the things that they would write here. And so you could take a look at some of these. And some of them are very factual, like photography can change the way you see the world, to things like worrying means you just suffer twice. If you're the smartest in the room, then you're in the wrong room. It was just like so like amazing. And I worked at a public school, which was actually my old high school, with students who were just like, some were like, I'm never going to college, to students, who were that was like their goal. But it was just like the different ranges of students had like really incredibly great insights, and it made them feel like, man, I really do have things to write about, because there are certain things that I believe to be true. So you can kind of see on the right side there is just like a picture of my bulletin board, and I never took like a full-on picture of it, because this was like the water I'm swimming in, where this was like a normal thing that was in our school hallway. I would have my TA like cut out all the different things that my students starred that they wanted everyone to know to be true, and we would put it on in the hallway. And I would see like underclassmen from different classrooms stopping to read these and take pictures of them, because they were so like insightful for them or encouraging. And so what's really cool is that you can actually use this to help generate maybe different insights. And so if you go to the next slide, you'll see that what's really cool is that all of these things that they know to be true are most likely attached to a specific value. And so sometimes students have a hard time like starting with values, like what are my values? But then they know for a fact what are some things that they know to be true. So say, for example, like the smartest in the room one, it's like it's clear they value personal development, growth, respect, and inspiration. For me, the last two are ones that I believe to be true. Like, we are all uniquely the same. So I talk about unity, compassionate understanding. And the last one was actually the first line of my teaching philosophy, which is everyone has a story to tell. So even before I was a college essay guy coach, I really truly believe that about my students. And it comes from the value of understanding, humanity, and curiosity. And actually, there is a story behind that thing that I know to be true, because I experienced when I was growing up in high school to be a wallflower. And I think that was one of the identities I said I left behind. And I actually worked at my old high school, and I worked with teachers who didn't even know I was in their class. That's how quiet I was. And I felt like kind of, I had a story, but, either I felt unseen or I was too shy to really like share it. And so what's interesting is that all these things that you know to be true, or the students know to be true, have a value, but there's also a story. So that's what's really cool about this. You don't need a graphic organizer or anything. You can just ask them, tell me 5 things you know to be true, or 3 things, or 2 things, And so you can help generate other content there, which is still rooted in value. Yeah. So what I want to narrow it down to, because sometimes if it's just like, tell me, what you know to be true, it might be too general. So I'm going to ask for all of us to practice this. What is one thing you know to be true specifically about education? And so I want you to even think about what values rise up for you. And here's the bonus, like, what's a story that made you know that to be true? So I'm going to give an example. So my thing that I knew to be true about education is that students with someone at home, when they get home from school, have a great advantage in education. Students who don't have someone at home waiting for them to keep them accountable are at a great disadvantage. And so my values for that are love, belief, and accountability. And so Wes Moore was our speaker, one of the keynote speakers during the NECAC conference. And he says, he wrote this incredible memoir I actually read right after I got back, called The Other Wes Moore, where there was a man who had the same background as he did, who had a very different kind of path in his life. And in the book, he asks him, like, are we the product of our environment? And he says, no, we're the product of our expectations, or the expectations people have of us. And so that really struck me too. And that's kind of like here. And the story behind this is because I was a latchkey kid. I never had anyone at home. And so there's like a lot more to that. But so I want us to try this out. What is one thing you know to be true about education? What are some values? And if you want, you could also like maybe type in the story really quickly. During the NACAC session, we actually had people stand up and share. But should we just have them do it in the chat?
Let's do the first part, because I think that'll be, more bite-sized. What's one thing you know to be true about education? And then maybe in parentheses, just give the value that you feel is, or the values that you feel like are connected to that. Let's pause for a moment.
I'll read some of these out loud for the sake of the recording, because you may not be able to see the chat. Someone here said, education is the great equalizer, but access to education is not equal. So the value of social justice. Education varies in different schools. Ouch. Education should be available to everyone. Right? Equity. It's access to education not only opens doors and opportunities, it can be life-changing for many. Absolutely. Continuing formal education is not for everyone, and that's okay. One size doesn't fit all. Yeah. Understanding humility and curiosity. Yeah, I agree with this one too. No matter how much you think you know, there's always more to learn. Intellectual curiosity. You cannot replace teachers with technology. Amen to that. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. That's in my 10 things too. Yeah. Humility, growth, curiosity. Yeah, so many wonderful ones here. And yeah, I would love to hear some of these stories in the future. But yeah, it's just a quick exercise for you to try out with your students too. Yeah.
Awesome.
Oh,
all right. So I want to talk a little bit about self-care and point you to a couple of resources. This is a podcast that I did with Angel Perez. Some of you heard it, maybe. Some of you maybe haven't. But if you go to the website, collegeessaguy.com/podcast, you'll hear, and we spend like about an hour just talking about our own journeys with self-care and some things that we're learning. And one of the things that Angel mentioned, and by the way, the question that I'm going to ask you to share in the chat is, what's something that you're doing for self-care, even in these next 10 days? So that I'm just going to like plant that seed right now. One of the things that he talked about is developing a morning ritual. And again, I'm sensitive to the time of year that we're sharing this with you. But when you have time and interest, my good friend Sage talked about how to create a sustainable, nourishing, energizing, intentional morning ritual. I know that's a lot of descriptors, but it actually worked for me. And I have, since this podcast, when we recorded it in July or something, I've developed a morning ritual and I've been able to stick with it for the first time in my life, y'all. So I'm curious to hear from y'all just a little potpourri of ideas in the chat. Is what are some things, what's a practice or maybe a boundary, and we're not going to share with a partner, we're just going to share in the chat. What's a practice or a boundary that you're working hard to preserve? Maybe it's no email on Sundays, for example, or sleeping with your phone outside your room. Let us know in the chat. We're going to pause for just maybe 15 seconds here. The purpose here is to sort of potluck style share some ideas, and hopefully it'll maybe inspire somebody else. I'm going to read a few of these. Short meditations using an Aura app and long walks with my dog. taking lab blood tests every 6 months to keep myself healthy. I feel inspired by that one, actually. Not responding to non-urgent Slack messages after 6 p.m. Working out early in the day. Making a home-cooked dinner once a week. Daily prayer and meditation followed by a 30-minute run. Love it. Beautiful. Thanks. We initially shared this one last at NACAC and didn't make it, so I wanted to make sure we shared it earlier on in the session. So, as best we can, we'll sort of, and feel free to share other things that come out during the session if you like. All right, we're going to get into, I'm going to speed up just a little bit because I want to share with you a few resources, and then we're going to slow down because Hannah's going to lead you through an exercise. So for high school course planning, one of the things that we haven't spent a ton of time on at CEG is putting out content on how to help 9th and 10th grade students think about course planning. So in a podcast episode that we released, I guess it was like a couple months ago, maybe it was a month ago, Tom, our community manager, and Susan Tree, who's some of you know, is just been in this for a long time, talked about things like, what are those solid academic courses that students should be thinking about? How do advanced courses actually get evaluated by colleges? Because both Tom and Susan have spent time on the college side thinking about that. There is that tendency to sort of like create a pointy, application or try to create one. Is there a danger in that potentially too early? The importance of self-directedness and how to actually encourage students to become self-directed, and looking at high school profiles and how are those evaluated by colleges. So I just wanted to put that one on your radar in terms of one more bit of, again, like a post November 1st sort of, potential little bit of PD. It's a lovely piece. And then really soon we're going to be putting out part 2 of the conversation, which is for 11th and 12th grade students, talking about how intellectual curiosity is often really narrowly defined, and then how students can make use of, in some cases, the additional information section to talk about intellectual insights and revelations from courses that they've had. So stay tuned for that. When it comes to extracurriculars and summers, again, here's another podcast episode that's coming up really soon. Tom sat down with Carolyn Starks, who works here locally as a counselor in Los Angeles, and she talks about how to think about extracurriculars in summer. I know that we're not necessarily thinking about that right now, but she talks about, where are these different, how do these extracurricular activities fit into the overall process, some myths around this. And, this is one of those, it's sort of like, hey, I'll listen to it, but it's nice to sometimes share it, and be like, hey, don't just take it from me, listen to this one. So this is one that I hope or anticipate that counselors will be like, here, sharing out, and listen to the way Carolyn's talking about this. For college list building, some of you probably use our college list building resources. If you Google college list, college essay guy, you'll find some of those, including past podcast episodes. But one of the ones that I'm especially excited about is a new list building guide that, shout out to Logan and Erica and Kristen for putting this together. But it's a list building guide for low income students. And we're calling it Developing a College List on a Budget. And so what Logan walks through is what, meeting 100% of demonstrated need. What does it look like? Where do you find these schools? What happens if you don't get into any colleges? So we're trying not to scare students there, but just sort of talking them through it. And then what does it mean for a school to really meet need? So related to this, there's an awesome guide called Auxilia. And this is a tool that was put together by a past Matchlighter student. And what this does is it looks at essentially a number of different that we track, like for University of Rochester, for example. It'll look at what kind of financial aid type do they offer, merit, need, or both. It shows the percentage of total undergraduates who are awarded financial aid, how many students were actually awarded, like the number of students, what is the cost of attendance, what is the estimated cost of attendance after the average award. And this is searchable and sortable. So you can kind of click which columns you want to show and hide. And then you can also, click these other things and make them show up in different ways. So I wanted to just put that on your radar as another resource that's available. And again, we'll follow up with all the links, but it explains things like, okay, you've got your EFC, you've got loans. Students may understand what those are, but they may not understand what a gap is or looks like. So we'll share that out. Personal statement, you hear from me a lot. I talk a lot about it. So I want to kick this over to you, Hannah, I'm thinking that this is maybe like a 7-ish minute. I know that's not enough time. Normally we would do this for like 20, 25 minutes, but for the sake of time today, maybe it's the 7-minute version of the identities exercise. Cool.
So in the chat, I put the link to this document. So If you click on it, it's going to have you make a forced copy. And so you may have seen me do this somewhere before, but it's fine. Every time we learn something new. And so go ahead and you can scan it, or you could click for the handout and you should be able to get it. It is in the chat right now. And so if you go to the next, yeah, so just press make a copy.
It's going to force a copy. So it'll make a copy, and that copy will then be in your own Google Drive, just to clarify what that is.
Can you just make a copy anyway? Oh, is that yours?
You got it.
Okay, awesome. So if you could go back to the last slide to kind of talk about like why we have this exercise and why we developed this one. So post SCOTUS decision, we felt that we really wanted to help students you know, kind of describe and like kind of explore their identities more. However, we actually started noticing, because, you know, all we do is think about college essays, we started noticing some of the trends of the changing supplemental essays even before the decision. I think a lot of schools were maybe even anticipating it. And so, yeah, so we actually, this was in development before. It's not a completely brand new thing that we came up with. But yeah, so if you could go to the next slide, you'll see. So there are very specific instructions, and I'm going to go over why there's so much setup for this exercise. But what I want you to do is to actually practice like being a student and seeing what it might be to go through this exercise yourself. And so Ethan said, you know, can we make this a 7-minute version? Because literally we did this at his house, and we, being the nerds we are, we did it for like 2 hours. So it's totally possible to make it a short version, long version. I'm going to show you the short version, okay? So when you open the document, you're going to see that there is one version of the exercise at the top. So first there's guidelines, but I'll get back to that. So if you go to the second page, you see that there's 3 columns here. You know, if you're old like me and Ethan, you'll know that the third column, it looks like a pound sign. It's like, it's not a hashtag, it's a number sign. So we're not going to be doing that one. If you scroll down a little bit more, keep going, keep going. We're going to be doing this one, the one without the pound sign. And so this is like the short version you could do with your students. So what you're going to do is you're going to write in for each of the domains what your identities are to you. How do you identify yourself in each of these things? And what I don't want you to feel like limited to is like just kind of the facts. I want you to kind of process what these might be. For some of these, they might be kind of easy for you, but some of the other ones might kind of reveal something. And so, Ethan, if you go back to the slides and you skip one. Yeah, so here. So for example, for me, for race, I put Asian American. For ethnicity, I didn't just put Korean American. For me, I put 2.5 generation Korean American because there's stories there. There's something about that. If you look at, let's say, family identity, I put oldest sister instead of just sister. There is something about being the oldest, like Ethan's the oldest too. There are lots of things that come with that. Then wife, then daughter. And that even showed me something, the way that I put those in order. For abilities, talents, superpowers, something that I would tell students is make sure that when you talk about these, that you're making them into identities, because sometimes they'll put like video games. It's not quite that. I know you're interested in video games, but are you a gamer? Sometimes they move it when they're like, oh, I'm not a gamer, I just like them. It's like, but if you're a gamer, you know, so it actually can stir up certain things and maybe have you omit certain things. So these are some of the things I include. Like, for example, by occupation, I'm no longer a teacher, but I do identify still as a teacher. And so, yeah, so I want you to kind of go through these and answer as many as you can. And even for students, we want them to feel a safety and not feeling like they have to answer all of these. So do the best that you can. I'm going to give you like another example. Let's say for class, economic background, you can put matter of factly what you are, but something that was like, whoa, a revelation for me is that I still put lower middle class, even though by my taxes, I'm not considered lower class, you know, lower middle class anymore. Because like, I was like, man, I still make so many decisions in my life because I still identify that way. So anyway, I'm going to give you, normally we give you like 4 minutes. I'm only going to give you 2 minutes to do this because it's a short version. So go ahead and try that right now. What I would like for you to do now is to actually scroll down to the reflection questions. And so I'm going to actually pop this in here. And you'll see here that there are a series of different reflection questions, and some of them have little asterisks next to them. So what I want you to think about is, which identity or identities influence my day-to-day life the most? It's like top of mind for you without necessarily thinking about it. So I know it sounds very kind of like hard to kind of put into words, but for example, I don't wake up thinking, oh, I'm a woman. You know, I don't think like that, but I think about the fact that I have to be careful when I walk to my car late at night, or my husband forces me to carry a flashlight everywhere I go, because being a woman influences my actions every single day. Does like maybe your able-bodied identity influence you? It does, but I don't think about the fact that, let's say I'm, heterosexual every day. I don't think about that. So what are maybe like 3 of the identities that impacts your day-to-day life the most? Is it being a parent, or, your race and ethnicity, whatever it might be? So think about that and just kind of go through and try to answer the one with the stars first. And some of these, again, might bring some tenderness, but some of them might also bring some really big revelations. So I would love for you in the next 2 minutes, normally we fill out all of it, do the best you can in answering some of these on your document, and then we'll share out, okay? I do want to address like something that needs to be, I guess, addressed from the top, is if you use this with students, it can still be used like later in the process. Like I just worked, I'm working with the school in India, and I actually said, I think maybe you should have your students do this exercise. And even this kind of late in the process, it brought up some stuff for them. Like, whoa, I don't identify as Hindu, actually I identify as this. And it was like huge revelations. But something that we need to name is that we're not all from the same state. We're not all in the same place. And so what'll be important is for you to be careful of how you use this exercise. That's like, don't delete all these like guidelines and things, because we don't want to get anybody in trouble if this was sitting on like a student's desk and the parents are like, why are you asking them about this or that? So just know that, again, it can be very sensitive for students, where certain traumas might come out, because that's what was brought up during the NACAC session that we did. And so just make sure that there's a feeling of like safety that you're providing for your students as well. So how do you apply this with students? Obviously the personal statements or supplemental essays. You could do this with your team, with family and friends. Like I told you, Ethan and I did together. But what's really great too is that there's a college connections document at the bottom. So if you have students who are like, I don't understand how this applies, like you can tell them, like, going from this, how can you connect it to this? Because oftentimes students think it's a why them essay, not a why us essay, but they don't know who they are yet. So they have to be able to match and identify both of those. Okay. And so I already went over that. So here's an example of a student who did why Yale. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but in the end, she basically shows her different identities of being an artist, advocate, and academic. And she shows how her identities match things that they have and how they can do be a great match together. And then this is like a way that a student can use it in their personal statement with all their different identities here. Again, it shows more variety. If they have challenges, it could just be a chapter in their story, not the entire book. Any student can use this. It can be combined with different themes, and it can show that they sense a feeling of belonging at their school.
Awesome.
Right.
Thank you so much.
I could do it for you if you want.
Sure. You know what? Let me do it. Let me do it. I got it. All right, we got about 15 minutes, and we're at 8 of 12 resources, with more coming. So here it goes. All right, let me skip back ahead. Okay. So one of the things that we've updated is our advice on the Common App additional info section. I think especially in the blog, it was sort of like we had some, suggestions for what students could put there, but we felt like it could really use some expansion. So we've added some pieces on students expanding on things like research and self-directed projects, and also how to write about your community in context. And again, post SCOTUS, this seems more important than ever for students to share context about their community or the school that they're in. So that's one that we'll link, and you'll see more on that. You'll also see our supplemental essay guides updated. We're updated a lot. So just to give you a sense of some of those, we have 70 plus supplemental essay guides. If you Google supplemental guides, college essay guy. And one of the things that we found is that of the 75 plus, probably 50 or more updated their supplemental essays. So if you I'm just going to show you the page. Some of you have seen this and some of you haven't. But if you go to collegeessayguy.com/supplemental essays, you'll see school-specific crash courses. And so we've updated all of these based on the new prompts. And what I did is I did a kind of like a zoom back analysis to see what is the most common prompt. And what I found is that the most common one was, what is a particular, how are you going to contribute to the college campus? And so we created a couple new blogs. One of them is the how to answer the quote unquote diversity prompt. And I basically broke down the most common types of prompts. There are also some others, but they're much less common. And then we also have a list of which prompts changed. So if you click this link, you'll see basically our own internal spreadsheet of like, here are all the different prompts that changed, in case you're curious to look at that. I also did a deep dive with Rick Diaz from SMU, talking about different supplemental essays and what are colleges looking for in the YS essay, which just happens to be his favorite one. And then there's a separate one for if you have students who are writing about trauma or writing about challenges, then this is a great one for them to check out. And it gives a good, strong argument for why you don't necessarily have to write about trauma or even challenges, and still you can show a variety of, different sides of yourself. Tina Young led a really lovely TED Talk on that topic. And, we connected on that. I will say that like, there's the blog post connected to it has the sort of practical, like, okay, do this, then this, then this. And if you've got students who are thinking about how do I write about my identities, no matter what race they are, no matter what cultural background they come from, the exercise that Hannah just did is one of our favorite ones for helping students generate more content. There's another exercise that is in the SCOTUS resources that we linked that I'll just show you real quick. That is even, I think, it's a really comprehensive one. Here, I'll show you this one really quick. It's called the If You Really, Really Knew Me exercise. That's a really good one for thinking about what are all those different sides of you that you could potentially show as it relates to your family, culture, identities. The identities exercise is kind of, nestled in here. Your school history, opportunities and experiences. And each of these columns gives a sort of like, what's the thing that you want to share, like the presenting thing? And then, so what? What's the thing? Why is this thing important to you? And this is a great way to get students brainstorming and thinking about, especially for those students like, I don't have anything to write about, or I don't know what, I'm just boring. I don't have anything that I'm bringing to the college campus. This is a great one. It's 10 questions. It's essentially like a really nice brag sheet that students can fill out. And I imagine it can be useful in helping write recommendation letters. I'm doing a count. How many resources? 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and maybe all 70. That gets us to 82 resources in terms of the other ones. In terms of recommendation letters, there was a whole separate session that we've done, and I think you can find the recording on our YouTube channel, but how to write effective and efficient letters. And Tom and Aaron and Aisha walked through our updated guide. And if you Google how to write a letter of recommendation, you'll see some updated advice in there with specific examples. And we've also got a couple different systems that Tom helped put together to basically, how do you sort of, format your letters in a particular way so that you're giving great content, great, information about the student, but doing it in an efficient way. Resource number 84, I'll cut the 70, we'll call this resource 14, is a new Paying for College resource that Amanda Miller, who's just incredible, put together. And this is, again, maybe something post early deadlines, but she put together a 24-25 FAFSA, a counselor-friendly guide, and it comes in at a hopefully counselor-friendly 19 pages. But essentially, it's like all the questions, or many of the questions that you would have or that students would have around the changes in the FAFSA. around, things like demographics and the no blanket, no appeals policy. So I'll put that in the chat here for those of you who rated yourself early on as like, wanting more resources around. Thanks, Diana. Sorry, I'm being redundant. Now I won't get into all these, all the changes here. So I see some of you are clicking the doc, so that means it's maybe interesting. But you'll see some of them listed here. And then beyond that, she's created an incredible Paying for College guide that's a really comprehensive guide, if you've never seen it, to essentially thinking about things like, am I going to get a Pell Grant? She's got this like great cheat sheet that will help students sort of think through that a little bit. Before we get to Q&A, a thing that I have around community, and this is more just sort of like a question to consider. There's no real like exercise around this, but is just thinking about who's in our counseling community and to what extent do we feel supported in our work. College Essay Guy, we have a counseling community that maybe you've heard of, maybe you're a part of it, who knows? But it's one thing that we're thinking a lot about virtually, and NACAC certainly has a great engaged community. But it's just sort of like I'm sort of just like launching a question rather than giving you a resource here. To be thinking about, like, what does community look like for you in the coming year? One thing we want to do is we wanted to give away a free workshop. So I will share with you, there's a little form. Actually, let me just stop sharing my screen for a second. And then we'll do Q&A. We've got a form that's just basically a sort of like, hey, how can CEG help you better in your work this coming year? Or maybe even, in the next few months. And if you fill out that survey, and you're at a school, you'll be entered for a chance to win a free workshop. That we do essay workshops all the time. We do them all year round. And so we'll randomly choose somebody to win that. We also do lots of PD and stuff, but you probably already know about that stuff. So let's shift to Q&A. Let's open it up. We got about 7 minutes here. Curious to hear, what are some other things that you're wrestling with, questions that you're having? Let's open it up. For those of you who maybe aren't filling out the form for the free workshop. Match sliders. Should I talk about match sliders, Patricia? Or are you just shouting out match sliders? Oh, for sure. Thanks for asking. So one of the things we love each year is, connecting students who are, in many cases, high achieving, low-income students with one-on-one support. So Match Sliders is a program that's been going, I guess, we started in 2015, so about 7 years. And essentially there's a simple application to fill out. You click here and we pair you with a student we tell students, it's 10 hours of one-on-one support. So if you've got 10 hours between now and December 31st, we'd love to connect you with a student for some one-on-one support. We have at current count, we have the QuestBridge finalist info came out today, and Erica let me know this morning, we have 28 finalists so far. So we're pretty stoked on that. So thanks, Patricia, for shouting that out, and thanks, Diana, for sharing that link. Yeah, 28 is kind of, and that's just as of today. That's like day one. So what else is on your heads and hearts these busy weeks? Again, thanks y'all for being here. I know it's a busy time. Yay. Congrats, Peter, for your student making finalists. Hey, thanks, Tanika. Appreciate you. Well, the purpose of this session was to give you like some resources and like to kind of give you a sense of like, here's some of the stuff that's out there, stuff that we've been working on, and to give you some little, hopefully not too deep dive, but a little taste of some of these exercises. I want to say that like, if I had to be like, here are the things that I really want you to remember, the resource around the If You Really Knew Me one, which has embedded the identities exercise that Hannah mentioned, is a really effective and practical one that you can like put in front of students, and even in like a half hour, it can generate a ton of ideas. The other one that I would say is worth bookmarking potentially is the collegeessayguy.com/SCOTUS resource that's got all those resources. If you've got students who are considering thinking about their identities and not sure how to write about them, hopefully that's going to give them some other ideas. How can I inspire students to finish their assignments? Rachel, just tell them to finish. Just tell them to do it. No. Boy, I wish I could figure that one out. If anybody has any ideas, please help Rachel and me and all us counselors out. How do we get students to actually finish their assignments? Boy, that is one I've not cracked the code on. Are you recommending everyone fill out the FAFSA, even if you know they won't qualify? What about merit money? Some colleges want FAFSA. I'm going to refer that one. I'm going to have Amanda do a session really soon on FAFSA stuff, like right after the November 1st. And I would prefer having her answer FAFSA related questions because she's a lot closer to it. But if folks want to chime in, we've got a lot of wisdom in the room. If folks want to chime in with their thoughts, please feel free. Let's see. Sarah, hi Sarah. I struggle with students who are late bloomers and they have very little content to use for meaningful activities and other such supplements. Any recommendations, any resources for students who are less engaging or involved with activities or communities? So that if you really knew me one is so far my favorite one. And I'll put this one in the chat again. Actually, let me just do the copy version. Is my favorite one for helping students to think about a broad range of things that they can potentially write about. Because what it does is it covers not just like achievements, things here, what I've done, but it really gets into some of the nooks and the crannies of like all the things that I'm interested in. What are the things you've been involved in? That one can sometimes skew more towards achievement. But this one can be a really lovely one. But I want to open that one up. Again, there's a lot of wisdom in the room and see, are there other things that y'all use to help students thinking about all of their different, what are the things that they could write about, especially those who are like late bloomers? Hi, Antoinette. Yeah, Hannah, jump in, please.
Share one. So if you use the College Essay Guide tracker, something that you can do to kind of create maybe some urgency for your students, but some students also work well with like checklists, is I'll show you like something that you can do actually is you can create like priorities. So you could put like the essay, the word limit, all the different prompts, like this one has a lot, but you can actually make it so that they'll be listed in level of whatever priority you give it, all the different due dates, medium, low. I know this looks like a ton, but it's like all one school with just a bunch of different supplements. But that could potentially at least give the students a little bit of like a feeling of, oh shoot, I have like so many and I have to do these. So that could be one way to kind of like really talk them through like how to do these. I don't know if that helps, but the priority like kind of filtering thing is pretty cool. So
I love that. Thanks. Yeah, a couple of questions that I'm answering in the chat. One was around truly optional prompts, like Duke, for example, and other schools ask, do you identify as LGBTQ? If the student doesn't, they don't need to write anything. This isn't the sort of like optional, but not really optional. It's totally fine to skip those prompts. If there's a particular one that you have a question about that besides the Duke one, I'd be interested to hear. Lena's asking, how do you best support undocumented students on their identity journey if they choose to write about their journey in the personal statement? Guess what? There's a blog on that. So if you Google undocumented student college essay guy, you'll see this resource. So this one has particularly just resources and advice for undocumented students applying to college. So this is sort of like the broad one that we have. You'll also see in this, there's a podcast interview that I did with Eliza Gilbert, which is on how to advocate for undocumented students. And inside this one, you'll see links to, should I come out as undocumented in my personal statement? Some things for students to think through. And then I talk through specifically, with students, what are some of the considerations? And then there's a separate podcast episode that I did with a student who decided to disclose his undocumented undocumented status and how that went for him. It's a very, as you can imagine, very personal choice. And I tend not to, as with race, be like, you should or shouldn't. But I do want to show students examples of students who have done it and how they've used it to talk about skills, qualities, values, interests, and like values and character that they're going to bring to the college campus. Because that's the big thing that the Supreme Court is saying, right? It's like, can you connect it to qualities of character, unique abilities that you're going to bring in to the college campus? So I don't believe optional is never optional. I think optional is sometimes is often not optional. Like if they're like, you can, if you want to send a personal statement, great. I think they should if they've got time to do it. But if it's like truly a question that the student's like, I can't, I'm not LGBTQ. I think in that case, that's an example of it being truly optional. Okay. Any research for the next stage of QuestBridge? If you Google QuestBridge College Essay Guy, we've got a guide for that. But if you're talking about like specifically on interviews, I would say they should go to the interview guide. So like interview College Essay Guy. But that's maybe posse. But if there's specific questions, let me know. Let's see. Okay, we're over time, so Hannah's sharing the tracker. Lovely. All right, I think we got through all the questions. Thanks, Hannah, for being here with me. I appreciate you, and always. And thanks, y'all, for being here on a Thursday night. Much love to you all, and we'll be back in a couple weeks with more resources and stuff for like sort of like dealing with the post EDEA crowd. So we'll send out an email on that. Thanks. See you soon.